Have you ever wondered what it's like to be reunited with your birth mother for the first time? So today I want to share my story about finding my birth mother as well as my family in Korea. When I was a little girl, I always wondered who I looked like. My adoptive family was from America, and my dad was in the Air Force, so we traveled around a lot. When I was adopted from South Korea when I was 10 months old. My parents were stationed in Japan, and we lived there until I was about 3 years old, and then we came back to America. When we got back to the States and I grew older, I would ask my mom if I looked like her, and she would tell me yes. And of course I didn't, and as I grew up, I would ask myself, do I have family members that look like me? And it was a question that I had for years. And it was one of those questions that I read a lot of books on being adopted. I wanted to know more. I wanted to know about other adoptees, what their experiences were like. I had read good stories, and I'd also read some bad stories. But in the end, when 9/11 happened, I know it gave pause to a lot of people to question a lot of things. And for me, it led to self-introspection, to start the search for my birth family, my birth parents, whoever else I had back in Korea. I had always wondered who this other family was, and I made a children's book recently, and by the time you guys watch this, it will be out into the world, and it's called Annyeong Korea, and it talks a lot about my search for my birth family and my reunion. And I'm so thankful that I was connected with KAN, a group, Korean American Adoptee. I'm going to get that wrong, but I'll put that up on. I'll put the name of that. But when I started my search for my birth family, I emailed KAN, and when I emailed them, they were very helpful. They said that they actually didn't do that search. They supported adoptees and their families, but they did link me up to INCAS, and INCAS was an organization that did help search for birth parents. When I contacted them, thankfully I had paperwork, kind of like a social security number that we have in America. They have a registry number. So they were able to send a letter to my mom. And they had to be discreet because a lot of people might have had a child out of wedlock. They might have had a child that their current spouse did not know about. Or perhaps they were single, had never told anyone about the child that they had given away for adoption. So when they sent the letter to my mom, it was about a month or two, and we were waiting. And thankfully, finally, they got a response. So that wasn't a long time to wait, but the response came back, and it was my older sister, the one right above me. Her name is Chang-suk. And it said, "Yes, we're so excited. We have been waiting for this," which was, gives me chills just now to remember that my mom had been praying for me for years to have a reunion with me. And we started to exchange emails, and thankfully we had a translator, and her name was Yeonju, and Yeonju would faithfully translate the emails from my family over here to America, and then my emails back. I was married to my ex-husband at the time, and he said, "Well, how do you know for sure that this is really your family?" And they started to send pictures, and it was really awesome because in those pictures, there was no doubt that this was my family. My two sisters, we looked similar. But the funny thing was, when I discovered my birth family, I had an older half-brother, and his name is Sun Chang, but of course for me, as a younger sister to an older brother, I don't call him by his name, I call him Oppa. And then I had two older sisters, Min-suk and Chang-suk, and then my mom had me, and then below me, after I had been adopted and I had been away for about 1.5 years, my mom had my little brother Jung-sik. But the funny thing was, when you looked at the pictures of those two sisters, I look the most like my mom, which is really amazing and awesome. And I still look like my sisters, but definitely there was no doubt my mom and I were related. You could see the resemblance for sure. So as we were sending emails back and forth, probably for about a year, I eventually thought to myself, I wonder if I can make a phone call. Now, anyway, I decided I was going to call my mom. And I know we weren't going to have a translator involved, but I still just wanted to hear my mom's voice for the first time since I was 10 months old. So during that first phone call, she started talking very fast in Korean. She was very excited, and I was excited too, and we didn't understand each other very much at all until she just said the word hallelujah. And I said the word hallelujah, and it was the one word we both knew, and we didn't need a translation for that. And so we just said it over and over because we knew not only did it mean something in that moment, but also it was a word that we both could understand, and it was such a happy moment. So we started to make plans to go visit Korea, to be able to meet in person my mom and my brothers and my sisters. But in 2002, I got pregnant with my oldest son, Quincy, and we didn't want to go right away. We went in 2004, and I was actually pregnant again with my daughter, Rory. I was 8 weeks along.
Vega Ferreira? Vega Ferreira? Okay.
There wasn't the cell phone, smartphones that we have now, and so it was difficult. I came with a little book trying to desperately translate things. Now, they did provide a translator, and one of the first translators we had was Yeonju, and she, of course, understood a lot of our background because she had been there translating emails. And when I say translating emails, I don't mean just one or two. I mean I have a stack. She really understood who I was, she understood who my family was, and she was just so helpful. She translated my book, Annyeong Korea, into Korean, Hangul, and it's at the end of my book so that if anyone wants to read it in Korean, they can. And so that's a really amazing part of that story. So when we went to Korea, it was beautiful. As Korea is, there are so many mountains, there's a lot of different food, and I enjoyed it very much, except being pregnant, my stomach was not always happy with eating kimchi in the morning, which is one thing that happens in Korea, that they eat the same thing for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So they don't have a breakfast food per se. They eat the same types of food. So that was an adjustment for my American palate. But how did we talk to each other? There were a lot of hand gestures. There were a lot of drawings. But all that to say, to go back to the first time when I got off the plane, it was 16 hours. It was a very long flight. I don't like flights, but of course I had to. I had to fly to Korea to meet my mom. It was pretty important. So the first night we came into Korea, I stayed with my older brother, my oppa, and got to meet his wife and his daughter, my niece Sunduk, and we would be driving to Daejeon, which is where my mom lived. And my mom lived in an apartment, as a lot of Koreans do. And as I was walking down the hallway, there was my mom. And she just started crying. So for 26 years, she had not been able to give me a hug. And that first hug was overwhelming, and I will share the footage with you. You can see my two brothers in the background, trying desperately not to cry. Because of course, in all of that time, my mother had never hid the fact that I was somewhere abroad. They knew that I had gone to America because my paperwork said so. But they didn't know about me. They didn't know what had become of me. They didn't know if I wanted to have a relationship. And now here I was. But it was surreal. And for anybody who's adopted and wants to have that reunion and wants to try to find their family, I don't know what your experience will be, but for me, my mom remembered me from 26 years ago, or at least the baby that I was, but I didn't remember her, of course. And so meeting a stranger who is your mom is surreal. As much as I wanted to have this amazing reunion, and it was also a lot to wrap my head around. And I know from my mom and my family members, it was like a dead person had come back to life. When I spent time with my family, they told me lots of stories. Unfortunately, my dad had gone to jail when I was a baby, and he'd also been abusive. And my mom thought that it would be better, that I'd have a better life away. And she was very sick at the time. She could hardly take care of the children that she had still. My older brother he's a lot older than me, so he was just away in the military. And my two older sisters were 5 and 7. And my mom wanted a better life for me. So she gave me up for adoption. And my adoptive dad, my American dad, he remembers meeting my mom as she was nursing me on the steps of the organization where they adopted me. And my mom said that her heart ached for me when I left. So when my dad returned home, she was so distraught and she missed me so much that she wanted another child. And I'm thankful because my little brother Jungsik is a great guy. Being a Korean American, I don't know if I've ever been in a room full of Koreans. But when I went to Korea, well, I know everybody didn't look exactly like me, but I could blend in for the first time in my life. My father was buried in Kunsan, which is where I was born, just by the ocean. And so I got to visit him there. He had died when I was in America and I was 12. So I didn't have the opportunity to meet him. There's so much there. There's so much that it's hard to explain how you feel when you're reunited with a family that you didn't get to grow up with. As a child, I grieved. I didn't understand, but as an adult, I can say I grieved not knowing my family. I grieved the culture that was lost to me for years, the language that I understand 조금, just a little bit. There's a lot that was lost, but there's a lot that has been gained. I know that not everybody has the blessing of being able to reunite with their birth family. And so I know it's a treasure for me. I'm really, really thankful. And I look forward to sharing a little bit more about my story in the next video. So if you haven't liked and subscribed, please do that. And I hope to see you next time. Okay. 안녕.